How bad it is. Okay.
Technology.
YouTube is so, it's just really difficult to use. It's, what's the word? It's anyway, we're live. Okay. Hi to everyone. This is amazing. I'm so terribly excited about today's interview. I've got to get the technology working. 1 second. Why can't I see that as usual? There it is. Okay, thank you. So today I am speaking to Neil Woods. He's a one-time undercover drug cop. Kind of started the whole thing in the UK. I mean, it's a bit more complicated than that, and Neil will explain to you why. And he wrote a book, Good Cop, Bad War, which is absolutely fantastic. It's really worth a read. You get the first-person experiences of someone who was in there, front line, on the street, with junkies, with the police, with violence and all that hideous stuff that surrounds that lifestyle. This man was there and he's written all about it. It's an incredible read. I'll leave a link in the description. I'm not affiliated with this. I'm not getting any kickbacks or anything. I just recommend you read it. It's not only an interesting and exciting book, but a very necessary book too. And you'll find out in it that Neil has ended up quite high up. We'll find out the details in a minute. In LEAP, which is law enforcement against prohibition. Is that right, Neil?
Yeah, that's right.
Right, great stuff. So, Neil, welcome to my channel, and I'm so happy that you've agreed to do this. I thoroughly enjoyed your book. People will know, watching this, most people will know that I spent about the same time as you on the other side of things, so it was particularly interesting for me, and like I say, a very necessary book. How has it been? When did it come out? 2 years ago?
Yeah, August 2016 it came out.
Okay, and what's the reception been?
Oh, well, the reception's been amazing. I was quite astonished, to be honest. So many people contacted me and thanked me for sort of telling people about it, because essentially it's a whistleblowing book. It tells people what people really don't know about how the police approach these things, including the use of tactics. So, although when it came out, I was public enemy number one to the covert policing world
Wow, of course.
for a while. As you can imagine, they don't like people talking about the secrets and things. But since then, I've had overwhelming support from police. You know, we've had other undercover police join LEAP, and loads of people contacting us, supporting us, and even now we've got serving police who want to get involved. You know, they converse with us on Twitter, and they're getting involved in the debate. And increasingly, it's serving police which is leading the reform debate.
Amazing. I mean, I'm an absolutist. I believe in regulation of all narcotics. I think it's insane. What you say there about serving police, excuse me, getting interested in and being part of LEAP. I can't imagine what that job must be like to, you know, I know that life, and you know, to be locking up users for a couple of bags, all the court, all the paperwork, and it achieves next to nothing. And what I got from your book was it actually increases the problems.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is that it took me a long time for the penny to drop, to be honest. I mean, I was stuck into that work, and I just kept trying and kept trying harder. And that's the mindset you get stuck into in the world of law enforcement. You know, you've got these laws, you've got to prosecute them, you've got to do the best you can. And you know, I got obsessed with catching the gangster at the end of a long operation. And yeah, and I caught plenty of some pretty vicious people. But it took a long time for the penny to drop to me that year after year, the reason that organized crime was getting more and more violent, and that the sort of ground level gangsters were getting more vicious, was down to me, or rather, not just me, obviously, but people like me. But I have to take my fair share of the responsibility of that, because I was so much involved in the development of the tactics. And you're ever trying to outsmart people, because it doesn't take long. You know, one gangster goes to prison, and then everyone knows the new tactic. So
Yeah.
you've got to be constantly developing new ways of approaching things, and of course the best response, and you'll know this, the best response that organized crime groups have to that is to just become more intimidating. They want to terrify everyone into not grassing them up, and obviously, the most successful people are the ones who are the scariest because no one's going to grasp them up, or the most successful ones are the ones who can make it really, really difficult for undercover police, like I used to do. So yeah, it took a long time. I mean, I was at it for 14 years for
Wow.
the most part, but eventually the penny dropped. That, I mean, you say it was a waste of time. It's much worse than that. It's much worse than futile, because what I was doing was I was making society more violent, because that's what they were doing to respond to my tactics. But also, all along the time, that people that were getting caught up in my net, because I caught some gangsters, but it's just people who were just using drugs problematically got caught up. People who needed help were having their lives made much more shit.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Basically,
an incredible level of honesty from you, Neil, and I really appreciate that and got that from the book as well. I mean, yeah, it's worse than futile. It's actually having an active negative effect on many situations and families and communities. I once done some maths based on like 50 junkies I know, what they're daily using, what they're having to thieve to make that up. And you do the maths and you times that by 50 towns, then by cities, and the daily, the money stolen and spent on your class A drugs in a day is incredible. These are fantastically huge numbers.
yeah,
And it was interesting. Someone was speaking to me a while back. We were talking about Johann Harry's book. You must know yeah, that one. Yeah,
brilliant.
and yeah, it's a fantastic book. I read yours and his together. It was amazing. I was properly indulging in it at the time, and and they were talking about regulation, decriminalisation, all the options, and how traditionally it's been a left-wing thing. I don't want to get this too much into politics and party politics, especially, but how it's traditionally been a left thing, reform. But they were saying that what is going on in Canada is they've been targeting the traditional right, because they've been saying this is hitting you in the pocket. The money spent on law enforcement, and if that time and money was freed up, I mean, how much police time do you know is spent on drugs or associated crime?
Oh well, so I mean, if just on drugs alone, within Leap we have two former chief constables, and I'm good friends with another former chief, and I do meet with those kind of level of police, and generally senior cops will tell you that the biggest policing budget, the biggest slice of the policing budget, is actually dealing with drugs because of the volume of it. But if you actually add together the drug-related crime, the kind of crime that you're talking about that pays for problematic drug use, it's massive. It's literally by far the biggest chunk of the policing bill. I mean, even Home Office statistics say that 50% of acquisitive crime is committed by less than 0.2% of the population. And that's the people who are the most problematically using heroin and crack.
Well, hang on. Can I just confirm that number? Can I just confirm that 50% of crime?
Acquisitive crime, yeah.
Okay, so thieving or mugging, that
Yeah,
sort of thing. 50% of that is carried out by 0.2% of the population.
yeah. That's the problematic heroin and crack cocaine users. And that's figures from the Home Office.
So to simplify things, and I'm aware this is simple, let's assume the heroin addicts were getting a regulated supply from the doctor. That number's being cut in half overnight, or if not more.
Absolutely, and there's fantastic evidence. I mean, that's common sense. It seems like a simple thing to say, but it really is that simple.
Yeah.
And there's lots of evidence to back that up. John Marks prescribed heroin for 10 years in the 1980s in the Wirral, and acquisitive crime dropped by 92%. You couldn't buy black market heroin because all the gangsters fucked off to Liverpool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they had no customers. And Switzerland, they've been prescribed. They actually used the evidence from John Marks to have the Switzerland model, and they've been prescribing heroin since 1995. Within 2 years, the house burglary rate had halved.
Wow. I mean,
how can governments ignore that kind of evidence?
It's shocking. There's another number or a series of numbers you've talked about. I can't remember if it's in the book or in an article I've read, but it's to do with the debate about criminals going elsewhere. If we regulated and drugs through, say, the government or whatever, some kind of medical authority, that the criminals would go to other crime. But you've questioned that, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's the classic police line. So if I when I speak in front of police, that's the point that they try and hit me with. They say no, because the criminals are always going to be criminals. They'll just do other criminal stuff. They'll move on to something else, and there'll be an increase in other crime. But that is absolute rubbish because it's not criminals that cause crime. It's opportunity.
Okay.
And the biggest opportunity that's ever been for crime is the prohibition of drugs. It's so it makes no sense at all. Every opportunity for crime is already being taken. You're not going to suddenly create huge amounts of opportunity for crime by closing down one set of opportunities. They, they're simply, and apart from the fact that most serious drug dealers that I've met, they wouldn't have considered for a minute committing any other kind of crime
No,
because because it'd be too high a risk for too little a return. That
that's 100%.
there is nothing else.
Sorry, Neil, that's 100% my experience. As in my late 20s, I was at university, I was at art colleges, and I sold drugs because the demand was incredible. It was very easy to do. You didn't need to be a gangster. You know, I could buy and wait and sell at a profit. That carried on throughout my 20s. Then I was trying to pay for my habit. Were that not an option, I'm not then going to become an identity thiever. I'm not then going to try and I don't know that I'm not a criminal. Selling drugs is basic. I wouldn't have looked for other crimes because I don't want anything to do with that world. But drug dealing is, you know, the demand is massive. It's simple and like you say, the opportunity is there. Can I ask, Neil, getting away from statistics and that for a moment? I know that that world is shocking. I mean, for 20 years, a friend of mine once said to me, addiction is characterized by lowering of standards, which I laughed at the time. And I kind of, when I was pulling water out of a toilet on a train once in a spike, I remember thinking, okay, this is getting worse. How did you prepare for that world, and how taken aback were you when you started hanging around with street level users? It must have been so different from your at the time married, child, job. What was that like, basically immersing yourself in that world?
Yeah, I mean, what I did really is I tried to learn as I went along. And the best way to do that, I had to try and understand what situation people were in so I could try and copy and just fit in. And in so doing, I suppose I just used empathy and picked up people's tales here and there, and sort of stored them up for things that I could possibly use as cover stories and things like that as time went on. But it was about understanding people and understanding people's situations. I mean, obviously, I dressed down and dressed the part, but in terms of the mindset, it was just learning about people. I suppose you could call that weaponizing empathy, really, because
Yeah.
that's what I did. I turned that on people, and certainly I got to know the most vulnerable of people because, quite frankly, they were the most easy to manipulate. So,
As a phrase to describe the madness of your whole undercover career, weaponized empathy is perfect. Absolutely amazing. Um, I don't know if you know Philip K. D's book, A Scanner Darkly. He's
I,
he's
I
an
love
under.
it. I love it. Yeah, and
I
that is
got
a great book.
I got a bit of that from yours. Because there's a split, a schizophrenia of sorts going on. I can imagine your day-to-day life hanging around on the streets and all that, and you were going back to a family.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a weird situation. I mean, sometimes I'd be living away from home, say 3 nights, and I'd be working long hours. But then I'd still go home and I'd be taking my kids swimming on a Sunday morning. It was quite surreal. But I remember I didn't have any training to start with, but eventually we had some level one undercovers give me some training. And I remember one of them saying that you can't act, you can't go into this work acting. You've got to play a different version of yourself. Because if you try and act a role, you will be found out because you're
Right.
trying to pretend to be something different. And you can't, an actor can maintain an act for 2 hours on a stage or for a scene in a film, but you can't do that on the streets for 8 hours at a time or 12 hours or however long it is. You just can't do it. So you have to still be yourself, but just being a slightly different version of yourself. So yeah, that makes it a little bit schizophrenic because you're slightly twisting your own values and the way of seeing things, and adapting those to the scenarios you find yourself in. So yeah, it can be, it's mentally taxing.
Yeah, yeah. People watching this, when you get round to reading the book, you'll see that. You'll see the effect all this had on Neil's life. It's tough reading. That what you just said there was incredible. You had no training initially.
No, not at all. I mean,
So hang on. So you were sent out. You went to your charity shop. You put your junky joggers on.
yeah.
You put some dirty old. I know the outfit. It's not far off what I still got. And you just went out. What was the first city or town? Or can't you say that? I can't. I don't know.
Yeah, well, no, I mean the first place was Derby,
So
and
you
only
went into Derby, front line, street using drug addicts, dressed up as a junkie, no training. What did you have? What was on your side? Information or what?
not really. I was just pointed in a direction, a general idea, and I just had to get speaking to people. That was it. But I mean,
Amazing, Neil.
it
I
didn't
don't think you
work.
realise how amazing that is. I mean, that's not happening today for sure. I can't imagine that kind of lack of preparation. You were just sent out. Go and collect information.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was given some money, obviously, recorded the numbers of the notes so that they could be tracked if they were recovered. Recorded the evidence in a. In fact, we didn't even have proper evidence books then. We just used separate note paper because you couldn't use normal police pocketbooks. So we were just making it up as we went along, really. And I mean, the reason for it at the time is 1993, and this kind of work, this kind of sort of bottom up undercover work, hadn't gone on in the UK at all.
Right.
We would had sort of high end undercover work, you know, introductions by informants to sort of higher level gangsters, but not starting at the ground level. And the reason that it happened is because there was the mother of all moral panics in the press about crack cocaine. In fact, the UK had been terrified about crack for about 2 years before there actually been any, because the tabloids are constantly running newspaper stories about how it was destroying America. You know, sort of echoes of Nancy Reagan
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So by the time we did get crack on the streets, there was this almighty classic moral panic, and that's why the Home Office directed all of the police forces to spend much more resources on drugs, gave them much more money for drugs, and that's where I came in because they were looking for cheap ways of getting results, and that was me, and a few like me.
You were the cheap way of getting results. Oh, you said that, Neil, not me. Did you ever? I can't remember from the book. Did you ever spend a whole night with users?
I mean, I spent not with them all night. No, I mean, nearby where I had a sort of fake flat where sometimes I had to stay there just in case someone was suspicious and needed to come and find me.
Because you became friends, you became good friends with one lad. I remember that from the book. They were, well, not good friends, that's an exaggeration, but there was one of them, and you. I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back, where you just thought, these are the victims here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I got friendly with a lot of people. It was a peculiar situation that I was actually getting
They're
on.
interesting people, aren't they?
Oh,
They're,
yeah,
I
totally,
find,
totally.
still to this day. I mean, I've just moved out. I lived in Soho in West One, and you can't walk for homeless people, and I'll still stop and talk to them because it's engaging. You must have. Well, you know this.
Absolutely, a lot of people had the most interesting stories, and you know, there's a sort of collective kindness and consideration to a lot of the street people as well. And it's something that I found really, really stark. I mean, I got friendly with a few, but I remember in Northampton there was a woman I chatted with regularly. She was fascinating, um, and you know, we got to know each other quite well. And I remember one day I thought I'd better play rattling because you know you can't just turn up from Mars and have money all the time. So although I made myself out to be quite a good traveling thief, bit of a scally, but sometimes you just got to play it. So I played rattling, and it was in the morning, and she saw me straight away. She says, "Oh mate, are you hanging out? Are you rattling?" And I says, "Yeah, I can't even graft, you know." And she straight away she put her hand in her pocket and gave me £5, and
Amazing.
it was her only £5, but it was that instant. And I said, "Well, you're going to need this." And she says, well, no, I'll be all right for about 4 hours. So to her mind, at that point, it was just quite simple. I needed it more than she did at that moment.
Yeah, no, that's
And that's just,
amazing.
where else do you find that kind of generosity where it's literally the only £5 you've got?
No,
And that wasn't uncommon either, that kind of generosity.
no, no, sure, I've seen it. Excuse me. When I mean, I think there was one instance in the book where the police got involved with some people, and you were part of that situation. I mean, that did that happen more than once in what 12 years?
Oh God, loads of times. Yeah, I've been arrested. I've been on the receiving end of a warrant, drugs
And
warrant.
when you're arrested, so what for scoring or grafting or like shoplifting, whatever?
Um, I managed to talk my way out of getting locked up for shoplifting once, and another time I ran away successfully, which is great fun. Shoplifting is fantastic fun anyway. I mean, I can say that because I wasn't in any risk of being incarcerated for it, but
Neil,
it
I would have loved
well.
your job.
Yeah, but it was fun. But I mean, I got arrested for yeah, I got caught with drugs, and I was arrested uh for a warrant. But I mean, I knew that was coming, but that was still terrifying. So God knows what it's like for people who don't know it's coming.
At what point do you get to say, you know,
But I
because
mean, I
you
can't.
obviously,
You can't trust the police enough to do that. You just have to go through the system.
so you got chucked in an old holding cell for a few hours.
Yeah,
You got your fingerprints taken, all that,
yeah,
and then you had
yeah,
to pretend you were getting sick in the cell, like all the junkies in the cell. Oh, I can't,
yeah,
can't do much more of this.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow. And
Because
no, you. So you haven't got to get out, literally a get out of jail card. You have to go through that process.
yeah, I mean, it was once offered to me actually by the team. They said, "Oh, we'll get you out," but I thought, no, that's not the way this works. No way, because I can't trust those cops. You know, it take me a lot to actually trust you, mate. I'm not going to trust these uniform cops in there. You're going to be joking. So no, it's a anti-corruption thing. I just wouldn't risk it.
And levels of corruption in the UK police, your that's was widespread then.
Oh well, I mean, I had hints of it all the way through my undercover work, but the most dramatic one was in Nottingham, where it was about 4.5 months into the operation, and I just managed to get introduced to this gangster who was a sort of lieutenant of Colin Gunn. Now, people can look up Colin Gunn; they might have heard of him. He was a sort of him and his brother were the head of the Bestwood cartel, absolute maniacs. He was letting everyone know that if he caught an undercover cop, he was going to kidnap them and torture them to death. That was what he was letting everyone know. So it was pretty tense. And this gangster had sort of interrogated me with a knife pressed into my bollocks the day before. So that had been quite a tricky day at the office. But this next morning, two of my backup team went off sick. So I got two new people on the team, which I wasn't overly happy with. But the first one I met, no problem with him at all. The second one shook his hand, and just the hairs went up in the back of my neck. So on an instinctive level, if everything about him just screamed, "No, this guy's wrong."
Wow.
So, but when you've been working undercover, you tend to feel a bit paranoid. You know, your senses are just on high alert. So anyway, I said to the guy running the operation, I said, "Look, boss, I cannot have this guy knowing what I'm doing." So he was great. He said, "Yeah, fine, no problem. We'll exclude them both. We'll just tell them to keep out of it, and we won't have them in the briefing." Anyway, that turned out to be really healthy instincts, because a year later, my job led to another. Colin Gunn was eventually brought down, and it turned out that the guy I had been suspicious of was an employee of Colin Gunn.
Wow.
He'd been paid by Gunn to join the police as somebody with no previous convictions, no criminal, no intelligence, nothing about him that would be suspicious. And he was just instructed to do his best to get into CID. He'd been in the police for 7 years by the time I met him, and he was paid £2,000 a month on top of his police wages, plus bonuses for good information.
Wow. I
So
mean,
in terms,
this is the issue, really, isn't it? The money, the money available to these gangs to keep the police happy is,
oh,
they can.
exactly. I mean, I should make something clear. The only criminality that can pay for that level of corruption is the illicit drugs market. The value of the money isn't there in anything else. But more importantly than the value, the monopolization isn't there in any kind of other kind of criminality. So, in other words, policing over time helps create the monopolies and concentrates the wealth in fewer hands. It's a Darwinian thing. Police will catch lots of drug dealers, but they catch the low-hanging fruit, which over time, which means you get people like Colin Gunn, who dominate sort of parts of inner cities. And it means they've got an enormous chunk of the pie, an enormous amount of money to corrupt the system. And senior police know that this goes on, because in the debrief from that operation, they said to me, Woodsy, of course this happens. With this much money involved, how can it not happen? And that's from the words of senior police. So police know this happens, and it'd be more helpful, I think, if the general public understood that.
Yeah, for sure. So how many people were aware that you were an undercover policeman? Not including family and things like that. I just mean in the police force. How many other police would look at you, would know you, or look at your name and say, "Oh yeah, he's our undercover"?
Well, not that. I mean, I had some breaks during that 14 years and went back to conventional detective work, and I had some weird reactions from people. But I mean, I still spent more time undercover than not. But when I went down to conventional policing, people were very confused and didn't know what I'd been doing. That was quite odd. But not that many really. I mean, some people that I worked with, and obviously the few people that worked for East Midlands Special Operations Unit, but not that many really. It was, you had to keep it tight, and all the brushes with corruption that I'd had, it made it quite clear that it was important to do that.
What was that like, going back to standard detective work? What kind of work are we talking here?
Well, I was a qualified detective, so I used to investigate serious crime, so rapes and serious assaults, that kind of thing, and I did some covert work investigating organised crime groups. But yeah, it was interesting. It was good to be able to walk away from undercover work for a period of time, because it's just so intense and it does burn you out. I mean, over time it burnt me out anyway.
Not addictive in any way?
It was early on, yeah, because I enjoyed the intellectual exercise of maintaining the deception.
Yeah, of course.
That sounds a bit calculating, but it is, it's enjoyable to be good at something, and it's good to develop skills. We all enjoy doing that. It doesn't matter what we do. So yeah, it was addictive in that sense, but it definitely left me burnt out after periods of time. I mean, the Nottinghamshire job, I looked worse than most of the problematic users who were around. My face had gone completely dry, and it was even weeping, split, dry face. Just from the rest of it. I was a proper mess at the end of that job.
Well, that leads me nicely to my next question. So 14 years, a lot of stress, a lot of obvious problems around family and things. Ever tempted to indulge in heroin or crack?
Not really. No, it's not. They're not drugs that held a massive amount of attraction for me. And I suppose seeing the very dark end of those drugs also put me off to a degree. But they're not something that really appealed to me. I mean, the times when I had to talk my way out of using.
Yeah, this is, I find this very interesting, because there's bits in the book where you've cooked up, you're ready to go, and you just sort of spray it somewhere.
I inject it into the. Well, I've done that a couple of times. I injected it into a car seat, so I made it to look like I was going into my groin, like a lot of people go into the groin.
Yeah.
I just injected into the car seat. I've done that in a pillow as well, in a house. So.
And then of course you had to then show an amazing sense of relief and sort of talk to your mate and go, oh yeah. and nothing's happening.
I think a good substantial amount of the time when I've seen people inject, many of people have had no reaction at all.
No, you know what?
No gouge, no relief, just nothing at all.
I was watching a stream the other night. YouTube was talking about using, and I was a little bit dubious based on some of the things he said. And then he said this, and this will make you laugh. he said, when I did finally succumb to using a Class A, he said, you know that scene in Train Spotting where he falls through the carpet? He said, I felt just like that. And I was thinking, no, no. And what you've just said is my experience of it. I mean, maybe for the first week it was different. But after a few years, you cook it up, you put it in, you put it in, you pull it out, you get on with whatever you're doing. It's less than fantastic. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
I mean, my drug of choice was always booze, and I was as I got more stress, and as I started to get PTSD near the end of my police career, then that was my self medicating, and I was doing it massively at one point.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, people self medicate, don't they?
Yeah, no, without doubt. Okay, so enough war stories. You got involved with Leap. Can you tell us a bit about what Leap is, what they do? Like I said, I'll put some links in the description. I'll talk to you afterwards, Neil, about what links to put in. But can you tell us a bit about Leap?
Yeah, no problem. Leap started in the United States, which I think is fair enough because it's the Americans which lumbered us with this drug war in the first place. So it's good that these seeds are beginning there, and it's basically law enforcement figures who have come to the same conclusion as I have. They're really big in the States, and we're growing rapidly here. In the UK, we have former chief constables, former MI5 barristers, prison governors, prison officers, magistrates.
People who've seen the real effects of this
Exactly,
ridiculous
but
situation.
but from the other side of the fence, from the law enforcement side. So we're a group of people who are campaigning to bring change. Interestingly enough, they've changed the name in the United States to Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and we're going to be doing that this summer because it's a better name,
Okay.
basically. But it's still the same acronym. So um, I'm on the board for Leap in the USA. I'm the chairman of Leap UK. We just set up Leap Scandinavia last October, and they've got 15 serving police and counting in Oslo and Bergen and places like that.
Incredible.
We're going to be setting up Leap Europe later this year.
How is that for serving officers? Serving officers to be part of Leap, does that bring with it problems or is...
Well, it does because you mark your card like that. People worry that it's going to just kill their career, but we have got serving police in the UK interested in joining, and they're certainly speaking publicly on the same topics and following our messaging online, which is just incredibly. It's exciting, really, because I'm convinced that change is going to be led by law enforcement for a few reasons. Politicians are stuck in this moralizing state. A lot of them, not all of them. We've got many allies, more all the time, but this moralizing, it's addictive. It's a ridiculous ideological stance. And cops, we like to follow evidence, and it's not too much to ask to have an evidence-based policy, which is why you've got Durham Constabulary and you've got West Midlands made their announcement a couple of weeks ago, and they're reforming drug policy by ignoring government and just getting on with it, doing it.
Wow.
In Durham, they're intending to use police budget as part of paying for heroin-assisted treatment.
Amazing.
And they're in the West Midlands. They're trying to find partners to fund heroin-assisted treatment now, which they've just announced.
Because they know that's money better spent.
Yeah, exactly. And police just get fed up of causing more harm to people by criminalising them. I mean, I spoke in Durham last July, I think it was, and the chief constable there, who went on after me, just said, right, enough talk, let's do this. We are decriminalising all possession of all drugs in Durham. They've basically said that no one's going to court for possession in Durham. That's decriminalising is happening despite politicians.
No, I was about to say to you, when you say that change is coming, I was going to say, when would you put that? But it's happening.
Yeah, it is happening. I mean, I met with. I mean, it's interesting what you said about reform being traditionally a left-wing thing. That's not necessarily my experience at all.
Okay, good.
So I would say actually, 12 to 18 months ago, our worst party for our allies was actually the Labour Party. I mean, yes, we had Paul Flynn. Yes, we've got Caroline Lucas, who's on the Greens. But certainly behind the scenes, we had more people who were on our side from the Conservative Party.
Wow.
That's slightly changed with the last election. Suddenly, we've got loads more Labour MPs who are supportive. Most notably, Thangam Debonair at Bristol. She speaks amazingly on it. Jeff Smith in Manchester. But I met with Crispin Blount yesterday, and he's one of the. He's very enthusiastic, and he's a new, very good ally, and he's an example of a very conservative approach for the need to reform, because there's two sides of it for the Conservatives. There's the libertarian view, but there's also the liberal Conservatives. So there's two coming at it for two arms within the Conservative Party, and that sort of side of things. But this is a cross-party issue, and so we meet with politicians of every colour, and on this issue they work together.
So hang on, what was that? So what LEAP actually does is research and provide information to government, etc., in an attempt to change policy. Is that a fair summary?
It is, but actually we're of the view that change is going to come from the bottom up, not the top down. And one example of that is what I just said in Durham, the police leading the way. But more important than even the police is the social movement. And any social justice issue changes from a social movement. It's the same for things like homosexual rights, gay marriage, whatever it is. It comes from the people. For homosexuality, collectively, society said, "Oh, some people are gay. Okay, fair enough." But where that tangibly happened, it's really difficult to pinpoint. But it's not politicians that led it; the social movement. So we're of the view that helping that social movement grow is actually more important than speaking to politicians.
Okay, I got it completely wrong. So the information is put out there to people, to the general population.
We do both, but it's the people that are more important. And part of the way that we do that is with our podcast as well. I don't know if you follow our. We cheekily call it Stop and Search.
Okay, yeah, no, I've checked it out in the past.
And we get 30,000 listens.
Wow.
And it's growing all the time.
I'll put a link to that in the description as well for people watching. That's excellent.
But also speaking events. So if anyone wants us to do a speaking event and can organise it, then we speak wherever we can, basically, because it's about connecting to people.
Incredible. So although, I mean, I know I've read before that you talk about you've done some very bad things and that you've contributed to a lot of damage and etc. etc. But that stuff also took you to here, and it sounds to me like what you're doing now and organizations like LEAP are fantastically important. And I'm personally I'm very happy that these things are happening and that people like you dedicate their time to it. It's incredible. I never thought I'd see changes that have already happened. I was using drugs like as a teenager in the 80s, and it was a very different situation then. And I would never have thought things. I mean, there's a long way to go. There's a hell of a long way to go, but I didn't think things would be even as far as they are now.
No, I'd agree.
I think it is encouraging.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, there's been massive change just in the last 3 years, I would say, since I've been involved in this. I've noticed. I mean, even the way that the newspapers, even the worst of the newspapers, the way that they report things is starting to change. And online comments after these newspaper articles, there's a massive shift in public.
Yeah. You see people just saying, just legalize it. People are like, get it out of the hands of the criminals. They're just and it's like, yes, do that. Can I ask you, Neil? So what would you want? What would be your ideal situation regarding legality and narcotics?
Well, I take the same position as you. Exactly.
Well, sorry, 1 second. And is there an official LEAP view, or are there sort of different views within LEAP?
I know we take a collective position.
Okay.
And our collective position, and this is international as well, and it's the same as your position, that we need to regulate all drugs to take the power away from organized crime and to make those commodities safer. Sometimes prohibitionists say that, oh no, we need to keep them banned. We just need to educate people more. Well, you can't educate until you've got regulation, because otherwise, what are you educating about?
Yeah.
And we need to reduce harm. So, I mean, in practical terms, what that regulation would mean probably doesn't mean that every single commodity would be available. And if you look at the work of Transform Drug Policy Foundation, they would suggest that the stronger forms of different drugs wouldn't necessarily be available, but the market for them would disappear if you have certain products available. But
yeah, of course.
But I mean, but I would go further than even Transform. For example, the cannabis market. For example, there is some suggestion that the stronger THC products that people call skunk shouldn't be available at all. Well, I would say no. You just need to give everyone choice, because the majority of, certainly from what I've read, the majority of cannabis consumers would prefer a more balanced product anyway.
Yeah,
And they give them
sure.
the choice, and they would use the more balanced product. Skunk is just, it's the moonshine of the cannabis world. And apologies to anyone who has a problem with the word skunk, but that's the word that's in the.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's the moonshine. When with alcohol prohibition in America, you couldn't buy beer after a fortnight because it wasn't cost effective to transport it.
Of
You could only
course, yeah.
buy moonshine or spirits, and it's the same. It's the iron law of prohibition. It's the same reasons. So you've got to regulate the lot, everything. For
Yeah.
heroin, that would essentially mean really only a medical model like we used to have in the UK.
Yeah.
But that would do it. You would have a massive, you would save lives, reduce harm, and improve society.
And then also, of course, if the market is government controlled, the money, even if they were to be selling these products at half the price that the criminals do, the money they would have for treatment, for education, for rehabilitation, for all sorts of things. I mean, we're talking billions of pounds here every year. I mean,
absolutely. The illicit market value, according to the most recent estimates by the National Crime Agency, is £10.7 billion a year.
UK.
10.7 billion just in the UK. That's one of the biggest businesses on our island.
Sorry, this crazy money. So yeah, even a fraction of that, what that could do towards education, etc., all those things.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Neil, I'm going to open up. We've actually got 130 people watching, which is lovely. There is a slight delay, but people in the chat, have you got any questions for the lovely Neil Woods? Let's see if anyone's got anything to ask. They're pretty much agreeing with us, Neil.
Well, that's good.
On most things.
I have to say then, if they do agree, and I expected they probably would have done anyway, because it's that kind. You'll have that kind of audience, I would hope. If you agree, then you're all part of the social movement. You're
There
all
you go. No, and I do encourage you people. I mean, the links won't be here now because it's live, but when this video goes out as a recording, I'll pop the links in the description. I'll also put them on Patreon, and I'll also put them on Twitter. As expected, they're asking things like, are aliens real, and will Rizzlers cost a fiver soon? So that's your usual YouTube. Here we go. We've got actually a real question. Have you met up with anyone that you previously put away?
No, I haven't yet. But it is something I intend to try and do eventually. I can't quite do it yet, and there's actually odd reasons why I can't try and do that yet. And that's because Good Cop, Bad War has been optioned for a TV drama by World Productions. So it means that I contractually can't do much publicly to do with that story until they've produced it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Later on, I'm going to try and meet people. But I have heard a drug worker in Leicester sent me an email to say that one of the people I talked about is alive and well. And just hearing that actually made me incredibly happy. It was because it's Ali. You probably remember Ali in the book.
For sure.
It's just really good to hear that, well, he's still alive and that he's not doing too bad, and it gave me a smile.
No, nice one. Okay, we've got some more here. They're coming now, thick and fast. Well, someone asked what caused your PTSD. I'm assuming years of undercover work.
It's quite complicated, as PTSD tends to be, but there's two sides to my PTSD. One is the near-death experiences and sort of those kind of things that I've suffered, but also, and This came from a discussion with a former member of the SAS that I know called Ben Griffin, and when I was talking to him about PTSD, he says, "What, you haven't got PTSD?" He says, "You've got moral damage." Because the main part of my PTSD is about the people that I caused harm to and how that affected me emotionally. If that answers the question.
No, no, for sure. It's that those questions came from Joe and Dan. Okay, we've got another one. Is heroin usage going up in the UK?
The most recent statistics from Public Health England suggest there's been a slight decline over the last couple of years, which
Okay,
shows, and it's been a decline, slight decline for about 10 years, actually. Not massive,
okay.
but but you just don't know what can happen with the heroin market. When you look at America, it's been increasing. Some other countries have been increasing. So we'll have to see what happens, really. But at the moment, it's level. I think, if memory serves, it's level at about 230,000 people.
Okay, thank you. That question was from Lucid Mask, sorry. Goofus wants to know, what do you think will happen in the Philippines? I mean, they're shooting drug addicts, aren't they?
They are the president Rodriguez Duterte is the very worst of fascist
Yeah.
people, and he's massacring. He's basically trying to solve his drug problem by killing people. And the vigilantes are doing it, and he's letting them get away with it. The police are getting more corrupt as a result. But the thing is, it won't have any impact on organized crime. It won't have any impact on the problem. In fact, it will make it worse, because if you make people's lives worse, if you cause people to have more fear, then what would you do? Well, to me, the logical thing to cope with that is to take drugs.
Yeah,
Frankly, so it's going to make the situation worse. But fingers crossed, the International War Crimes Tribunal or the international with the UN are actually going to try and prosecute him. Fingers crossed. I mean, knowing the pace of the UN, that probably take another 5 years, but at least there is some kind of international attention on what he's doing.
yeah, it's absolutely shocking behaviour. Okay, couple more. As Dead as Dillinger wants to know, would legalizing drugs cause them to lose part of their forbidden allure?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I've seen some other people suggest this actually, that it's actually doing something a little bit naughty that attracts some people to do some drugs. But I don't know, because I like the line that Professor Nutt takes on this, Professor David Nutt. I love to hear him speak, and what he talks about when prohibitionists say that there'll actually be an increase, say for example, in cannabis use if it's made regulated. And I'm not sure that there would be, but David Nutt thinks that there would. He says, yeah, of course there would. And he says, good. I'm glad there will be, because it'll be in competition with alcohol. Less people will use alcohol and less people will die as a result, because alcohol's more dangerous. Just in strictly scientific terms of what would be the best for health, And
Yeah,
I think that's a reasonable way of seeing things. So yeah, some people might use less drugs because it's less of a lure, but it depends on the drug, doesn't it? I mean, people take drugs for different reasons.
yeah,
People take heroin to numb things, and people take MDMA because it's good to dance on. It's but like once all drugs are regulated, less people will die, and that's the most important thing, I think.
no, for sure. Couple more, Neil. I've got a bit of an echo there. Who was the most dangerous guy you encountered?
Probably any of the Burger Bar boys, to be honest, because whenever I was with them, they cultivated this perfect air of unpredictability and immediate violence. And all the time I was with them, I just felt that suddenly I might get a beating or something really vicious might happen. And quite a few times I actually thought they were going to murder me. And
Wow.
certainly one of them was, I'd seen the intelligence that one of them was implicated in 7 different murders in Birmingham, and that he was in the car for the Letitia Shakespeare uh, murder and her friend Charmaine Harris, is it? That he was the one who got away with that and sourced the guns for it. And they were just incredibly vicious people, but they turned sort of the terrifying persona into an art form. They really did. So
So the
probably them, I think.
So the person asking what caused Neil's PTSD, when you hear a man say several times he thought they were going to murder him, I imagine that kind of builds up after a while. Interesting question here from Klopstan. Did you ever let anyone off the hook for whatever reason?
Yeah, quite a few times, to be honest. I remember I went to this free party, which was unusual. It wasn't a free party outdoors. It was in these big set of rooms above a pub. It's a weird situation, but it's quite young in my undercover career, and I was sent in because apparently I was told some big hitters from Nottingham were going to be turning up and supplying the drugs.
Okay.
I went in there, and I'm quite a dance music fan, and the music was incredible. It was like sort of minimal Detroit techno. It was just amazing atmosphere and people dancing and the dreadlocks flying, and it was basically just a bunch of hippies having fun. And there was no big hitters turning up at all. You know, I asked someone if I could score, and they just said, "Oh yeah, you can have these if you want." They were just giving them to me, and myself and my colleague thought, "There's no way I am gathering evidence in this party. Just no way, because these are not criminals. They're just hippies." So we thought, "Fuck it," and we actually just scored some cannabis. We got some, I think, some Thai sticks and some charis, and we made a sort of green and resin blunt, and just got stoned. And
Nice.
I actually thought at that time, well, this is the end of my undercover career because we just couldn't do it. We just literally just couldn't do it. So yeah, that was letting him off, I think.
So hang on. So there was a couple of you there.
Yeah, there was me and a colleague. Yeah.
So what I like about that situation, who breached that, or was it just obvious, or did you just sort of say, I can't. Let's just have a party. I can't do this.
Well, I was really uncomfortable, and we just kept looking at each other. You know, when some people are offering us free drugs, and how nice people were. But it was actually Kate who said to me, "No, nah, fuck this. I can't do this job anymore." That's what she said. And I was thinking, oh, well, I'm glad, I'm relieved that you're feeling the same way as me. But it was her that suggested, well, let's just score some green. Let's
And
let's
some
just
charis,
stop
no
this.
less.
Not
The
doing this.
finest,
But we found
finest
some,
hand
some
rolled
charis.
Himalayan. Sorry.
Well, yeah, but we found some charis. You know, we found some quality stuff. So we just took the decision there to give up undercover work. That, as far as we were concerned, that's what we were doing at that point because we just couldn't do that. But we did spend about 4 hours there dancing.
I'm just trying to imagine. I mean, being stoned is weird anyway, especially with something like charis. You're at a party, you're an undercover cop, but you're not going to do any work. You're going to get stoned. That asks a lot, and this is what takes me back to Scanner Darkly. God knows how I'd have slept that night.
Yeah, but to be honest, though, it was a real sense of relief when we'd taken that decision. You know, because it was so uncomfortable. And then it was a sense of freedom. We thought, well, sod it. You know, okay, I won't be doing this work again. But at least that, you know, we don't have the pressure of doing something which would clearly be wrong. Because
hang on. Sorry, I've misunderstood. When you say that this was the moment you knocked it all on the head.
No, well, it wasn't. But I decided that, okay, well, this is going to cost me my job. I won't be able to work undercover again because we're just going to get stoned. We'll go to the debrief afterwards, and we won't have any drugs with us, and we're going to be dribbling wreck. So we thought, well, it's our career over. But we did go back to the debrief afterwards, and we didn't have any drugs to give them, and we were dribbling wrecks, but they didn't say a word. And my undercover career just carried on. Just not a word was said.
Wow.
So, you know, so that's the first time I gave it up.
Sign me up. Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for people for watching live. Like I said, there'll be links in the description. There'll be a link to Neil's book. There'll be a link to Leap. Get involved if you can. It's a very worthy cause. Thank you very much, Neil. Can you stay on a bit after I terminate the recording?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much.
Nice one. Thank you, everyone. Bye.